The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and shivering. Rusty, no bigger than a large house cat, whimpered. Each shallow breath sent a jolt of pain through his left hind leg. The fence loomed, a dark, impenetrable barrier against the pale morning light. He pressed closer to the bottom wire, seeking some meager warmth from the mud. The air hung heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine, a scent that usually brought comfort, but now only amplified his loneliness. A shadow fell across him. Rusty instinctively flattened himself against the ground, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He peered up, his amber eyes narrowed, ready to defend himself against whatever monster had sound him. It was a man. Old, judging by the network of wrinkles etched around his kind eyes. He wore a faded plaid shirt and heavy work boots, caked with mud. Old Man Hemlock. Rusty had seen him before, from a distance, tending to his cattle. He smelled of horses, leather, and something else. Something earthy and grounding. Hemlock crouched down. His movements slow and deliberate. He didn't reach out, didn't speak. He just watched, his gaze gentle and assessing. The silence stretched, punctuated only by Rusty's ragged breathing. Finally Hemlock spoke, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. "Well now, what have we here?" Rusty remained frozen, his growl softening into a whimper. He couldn't run, not with his leg throbbing. He could only hope this giant wouldn't hurt him. Hemlock slowly extended a hand, palm up, offering no threat. Rusty flinched but didn't move. The man's hand was calloused and scarred, but the touch, when it came, was surprisingly gentle. He ran his fingers lightly over Rusty's matted fur, pausing at the injured leg. Rusty hissed, a sharp, involuntary sound. "Looks like you've had yourself a rough night," Hemlock murmured, more to himself than to Rusty. He examined the leg more closely, his brow furrowed. "Broke, I reckon. Clean break." He straightened up, his gaze sweeping the surrounding area. "Lost to. Ain't seen your mama around, have I?" He knew the answer before he finished the question. A bobcat cub this young wouldn't stray far from its mother unless something was terribly wrong. Hemlock stood for a long moment contemplating. He was a creature of habit, set in his ways. His ranch was his sanctuary, a place of order and routine. Bringing in a wild animal, that was a disruption. But the cub wouldn't survive out here, not alone, not with that injury. With a sigh, Hemlock carefully scooped Rusty up in his arms, supporting his injured leg. The cub tensed, claws digging into the man's thick coat, but he didn't struggle. He was too weak, too scared. He trembled against Hemlock's chest, his heart hammering against his ribs. "All right now, little fella," Hemlock said softly, his breath ruffling Rusty's fur. "Let's get you warmed up and patched up." He turned and headed towards the ranch house, the little bobcat cradled securely in his arms. The house, a simple structure of weathered wood, stood in stark contrast to the wildness surrounding it. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth and shelter. Rusty buried his face in Hemlock's coat, the scent of leather and horses now laced with a hint of wood smoke. For the first time since the storm, a flicker of hope ignited within him. Maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't be alone after all. A warm bed and a hurt leg. The cabin air, a blend of wood smoke and slow-cooked stew, hung heavy. Hemlock gently deposited the bobcat kitten on the braided rug before the crackling hearth. "Let's see what we've got here, little fella," he murmured. Despite the fire's warmth, Rusty trembled, attempting a futile escape as his claws scraped against the wool. Hemlock's voice, gravelly yet gentle, reassured. "Easy now. Just a peek. Won't make it worse, I promise." He approached cautiously, extending a hand for the cub to sniff. A weak hiss, more pathetic than threatening, escaped Rusty's lips. With unexpected delicacy, Hemlock traced the matted fur, locating the injury high on the left hind leg. A ragged laceration, still weeping crimson, throbbed in sync with the cub's shallow breaths. "Nasty break," Hemlock observed, more to himself than the animal. Snagged on something, I wager. From a nearby cupboard, he fetched a basin of tepid water, a clean cloth, and a bottle of amber antiseptic. Kneeling by Rusty, he soaked the cloth and began to cleanse the wound with painstaking care. A violent flinch and a low growl rumbled in the cub's small chest. Rusty fought to pull away, but Hemlock maintained a steady hold, his large hand surprisingly featherlight against the fragile body. "Settle down, you little varmint," he soothed, his voice a low vibration. "This'll sting something fierce, but it's necessary." The antiseptic was met with a yelp, a piercing cry that twisted in Hemlock's gut. The cub thrashed, tiny claws extended like needles, but Hemlock persevered, murmuring soft, meaningless syllables intended to soothe, not explain. Bandaging followed, the roll unfurling as he carefully swathed the leg, judging the pressure with practiced intuition, securing the wrapping with a small pin. "There you go," he announced, finally releasing his hold. "Best I can do for the moment." Rusty retreated, eyes wide and wary, to the rug's edge, panting and regarding Hemlock with suspicion. A sigh escaped Hemlock, his joints protesting as he stood. He ladled stew into a bowl and placed it a few feet from the cub. "Eat. You need the strength." He tended the fire, then retreated to his room. "I'll let you be for a while. Try to rest." The softest of sounds, a whimper perhaps, drifted out as the door clicked shut. He hoped the cub would find appetite, hoped he'd acted wisely. Abandoning it to the wild felt unthinkable. But a bobcat kitten taking up residence. What in the blazes had he gotten himself into? Bess's watchful eye. From beneath the cottonwood's dappled shade, Bess observed, her amber gaze sharp. Hemlock was at it again, fussing over some small, fawn-colored creature trembling on the porch. Rusty, the bobcat kitten. Hemlock had brought the creature back yesterday, a pitiful shivering scrap of fur and bone with a leg bent at a sickening angle. Bess hadn't welcomed the addition. The ranch was her charge, her domain. A responsibility currently complicated by 4 squirming, miniature versions of herself attempting a summit of her spine. A symphony of squeaks and playful snarls erupted as the pups wrestled, tiny claws prickling her hide. Oblivious to her misgivings, they were consumed by the critical task of ear nibbling. Bess shifted, nudging them with her snout. They grew larger each day, their inexhaustible energy a constant test of her patience. One of the bolder ones, a male sporting a black eye patch, broke from the tumbling mass and toddled toward the porch. Bess stiffened. Curiosity could be a fatal flaw, especially when aimed at strange, potentially dangerous beings. A low, guttural whine rumbled in her chest, a silent plea for caution, but the pup persisted, drawn by the intriguing stranger. Rusty, jolted by the approaching fluffball, instinctively braced. A hiss, ragged and edged with fear, tore through the stillness. It spoke of pain, of vulnerability, but Bess heard a challenge. Declaration. Her ears flattened, a growl gathering like a storm cloud in her throat. The puppies, startled by the combined threat, scattered back to her, whimpering softly. Hearing the disturbance, Hemlock glanced over, his brow furrowed with concern. "Easy now, Bess," he soothed, his voice a calming balm. "He's just frightened." Bess remained unconvinced. She knew fear. She also knew the speed with which fear could morph into aggression. Her gaze remained locked on Rusty, assessing, calculating. Small, yes, and wounded, but a current of wildness flickered in his eyes, a spark she couldn't dismiss. An outsider. And until he proved harmless to her and her litter, vigilance was her only option. The sun blazed, turning the porch boards scalding under Rusty's paws. He remained rigid, watching the canine family with wide, cautious eyes. The pup with the black patch, now safely tucked amongst his siblings, continued to stare, a silent, innocent invitation to join their romp. Rusty, however, stayed put, caught between apprehension and instinct, uncertain of what awaited him. Bess, the unwavering guardian, wouldn't let him forget his place. Not yet. Hunger and hesitation. The bowl sat steaming on the worn floorboards, a generous portion of ground beef glistening under the dim kitchen light. Hemlock knelt, his joints protesting with a familiar creak. "Come on now, little fella," he coaxed, his voice a low rumble. "Gotta eat something." Rusty remained huddled in the corner, his emerald eyes wide and unblinking. The scent of the meat, though rich and savory, did nothing to tempt him. He pressed himself further into the shadows, a low growl rumbling in his chest, more a whimper than a threat. Hemlock sighed, the sound heavy with concern. He tried everything. Warm milk, shredded chicken, even a dab of honey. Nothing. The kitten hadn't touched a thing since he'd found him, his small body trembling with a mixture of pain and fear. The rancher straightened, his back aching. He couldn't force the animal. He knew that much. He just hoped the stubborn creature wouldn't starve itself to death out of spite. He turned and busied himself at the sink, the clatter of dishes a deliberate attempt to create a more normal atmosphere. Maybe if he ignored the bobcat, the hunger would eventually win out. But when he glanced back a few minutes later, Rusty hadn't moved. He was still in the corner, but his gaze was fixed on the window, on the blurred landscape beyond the glass. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard, painting the swaying grasses in hues of gold and brown. Hemlock followed the kitten's gaze. The wild expanse of the prairie, stretching out towards the horizon, beckoned. He knew what the animal was missing: freedom. The taste of the wind, the scent of the earth, the endless possibilities of the hunt. He understood the hesitation. This warm, safe kitchen, the promise of regular meals. It was a cage, albeit a gilded one. The old man ran a hand through his thinning hair, a wave of guilt washing over him. He'd thought he was doing the right thing, rescuing the injured creature. But maybe, just maybe, he was condemning him to a different kind of suffering. The puppies, oblivious to the tension in the room, tumbled over each other near the doorway, their playful yelps a stark contrast to the bobcat's silent misery. Even Gretchen, usually so eager for attention, seemed subdued, her tail tucked low as she watched Rusty with a knowing look in her amber eyes. Hemlock scrubbed at a stubborn stain on a plate, the silence of the house pressing in on him. He had to find a way to reach the little bobcat, to convince him that this wasn't a prison, but a sanctuary. Or, he realized with a sinking feeling, he had to face the possibility that he was wrong. Terribly wrong. An unexpected offer. Rusty hadn't touched the rabbit. Flies buzzed lazily around the untouched offering, daring to land on the cooling fur. Old Man Hemlock sighed, the sound like dry leaves skittering across the porch. He'd tried everything. Fresh kill, cooked chicken, even a saucer of cream which, back in his younger days, had been enough to coax the most stubborn barn cat. But Rusty remained stubbornly uninterested, his golden eyes fixed on the distant, hazy mountains. Freedom lived there, Hemlock knew, in the rustling pines and hidden canyons. Not in a box in his kitchen. Bess, ever vigilant, watched from her corner, her pups a wriggling, squeaking pile beside her. She'd been suspicious of the bobcat kitten from the start, a wild thing brought into her carefully ordered world. She hadn't growled, not exactly, but her low rumble was enough to keep Rusty pinned in place, a silent threat hanging in the air. Now, though, Hemlock noticed a subtle shift in her posture. Her ears, usually pricked forward, were relaxed, and her tail gave a soft thump against the worn linoleum. The old man leaned closer, his joints protesting with a chorus of creaks. Bess rose slowly, stretching her long body. She padded softly towards Rusty's box, her nose twitching as she assessed the situation. Rusty didn't flinch, didn't even seem to notice her approach. He just stared, a tiny, broken predator dreaming of the hunt. Hemlock held his breath. He expected a snarl, a warning nip. Instead, Bess stopped a few inches from the box, her dark eyes studying the rabbit. She lowered her head, nudging at a particularly fleshy piece, pushing it closer to Rusty's nose. It was a gentle prod, almost hesitant. Rusty didn't react. Bess nudged it again, a little harder this time. The meat shifted, the scent of blood filling the small space. Still, Rusty remained motionless, a statue carved from fur and bone. Hemlock felt a lump form in his throat. He'd seen Bess nurture her pups, fiercely defend her territory, but he'd never witnessed this kind of compassion. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible gesture, but it spoke volumes. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the silent kitchen. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. He straightened up, his back protesting with a sharp twinge. "Never thought I'd see the day." He watched Bess for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of wonder and gratitude. Maybe, just maybe, this little wildcat had a chance after all. And maybe, just maybe, Bess was the one who could give it to him. Tentative bite. The offering sat heavy in the air between them, a hunk of cooked rabbit, still steaming faintly. Rusty didn't lower his gaze from Bess. His eyes, usually so vibrant, now dull pools reflecting the dying embers of the cook fire. He hadn't moved from his spot beneath the porch in hours, not even when the puppies tumbled over him in their clumsy play. He'd simply endured, a statue carved from dust and despair. Bess nudged the meat closer with her boot. "Eat," she commanded, but her voice lacked its earlier steel. It was softer now, laced with something else. Pity. Compassion. Rusty couldn't name it, didn't trust it enough to try. He shifted, a tiny tremor running through his frame. The scent of the rabbit, rich and gamey, tickled his nostrils, a forgotten language spoken to a starving beast. Still he hesitated. Food held no allure. Nothing did, except perhaps the distant, jagged silhouette of the mountains against the bruised purple sky. That was freedom, that was escape. Slowly, cautiously, he lowered his head. He sniffed the rabbit, a long, drawn-out inhalation. It smelled real, undeniably real, not tainted with poison or deceit. He raised his eyes again, locking onto Bess's face. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of weary patience. He took a bite, a tentative nibble at the edge of the meat. The flavor exploded in his mouth. Savory, smoky, a symphony of forgotten tastes. He chewed slowly, carefully, assessing. Was good. Astonishingly good. He swallowed, the act seeming to unlock something deep within him. Another bite. This one larger, more decisive. He felt the gnawing emptiness in his belly, the ache that had become a constant companion. Hunger, a primal force, began to stir, overriding the fear, the suspicion, the broken spirit. He ate with a desperate, silent fury, tearing at the rabbit with his teeth, devouring it in gulps. Bess remained motionless, watching him, her arms crossed. He didn't acknowledge her, didn't dare break the spell. He was simply a creature driven by instinct, focused on survival. Soon, only bones remained, scattered on the dirt floor. Rusty licked his muzzle, a low growl rumbling in his chest, a sound that was almost contented. He looked up at Bess, his eyes still guarded, but a flicker of something new sparked within their depths. Gratitude. Hope. It was too early to tell. He didn't move from his spot under the porch, but this time the mountains didn't seem quite so far away. Healing in playtime. The stiffness in Rusty's leg had begun to ease. Each day, he tested it a little more, gingerly placing his weight on the mending bones, feeling for the sharp stab of pain that had become his constant companion. It was still there, a dull throb, but not the searing agony of before. He could limp without whimpering now. Bess still brought him food, her approach quiet, almost apologetic. She never spoke, just placed the bowl near him and retreated. Rusty ate quickly, driven by the gnawing hunger that had been his only focus for so long. He was starting to recognize her scent, the faint aroma of earth and dog fur that clung to her clothes. He no longer flinched when she came near, his amber eyes following her with a flicker of something that might have been gratitude. One afternoon, as he lay in the sun, a clumsy puppy tumbled towards him, its paws slipping in the loose dirt. It yipped, a high-pitched sound, and batted playfully at Rusty's tail. He tensed, ready to lash out, but the puppy was so small, so utterly without malice. Hesitantly, he lifted a paw and batted back, a gentle tap that sent the puppy sprawling. It yelped again, but this time it sounded like laughter. The other puppies, emboldened by their siblings' bravery, swarmed him. They nipped at his ears, tugged at his fur, their tiny teeth surprisingly sharp. Rusty, instead of fighting, found himself tolerating their antics. He even started to play back, swatting at them with his paws, letting them chase him in a slow, lumbering circle around the yard. The puppies, sensing his change in mood, became bolder. They tumbled over him, a wriggling mass of fur and paws. Rusty, for the first time in what felt like forever, forgot about the pain, the hunger, the fear. He was just another creature in the sun, playing with puppies. The game grew more boisterous. Rusty, his limp less pronounced now, chased the puppies, his ears twitching, his eyes bright with something akin to joy. The puppies scattered, yipping and barking, their tails wagging furiously. They darted between the trees under the porch, around Bess's legs as she hung laundry on the line. Bess stopped her work, watching the unlikely scene unfold. A small smile touched her lips. She had never seen Rusty interact with the puppies like this before. There was something almost tender in his movements, a gentleness she wouldn't have thought him capable of. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to heal not just physically but in other ways too. The coyote threat. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, painting the valley in hues of orange and purple. Rusty, propped up on a mound of blankets Bess had arranged for him, blinked slowly. He was feeling stronger, the dull ache in his leg replaced by a persistent itch. The puppies, a tumbling mass of fur and clumsy paws, were strangely quiet for once. Bess, usually hovering protectively, was nowhere to be seen. Old Man Hemlock shuffled out of the house, a steaming mug in his hand. "How's our patient doing?" he asked, his voice raspy with age. Rusty merely grunted in response, his gaze fixed on something beyond the porch. Hemlock followed his line of sight. Circling the perimeter of the ranch, mere specks against the fading light, were coyotes. 5, maybe 6 of them, their silhouettes sharp against the skyline. They moved with a deliberate, unsettling grace, their presence a silent threat. "Damn," Hemlock muttered, his hand tightening around the mug. He'd seen coyotes before, of course, but never this bold, this close to the house. It was the puppies, he realized, their scent carrying on the wind. Suddenly, Bess exploded from beneath the porch, a furious bark ripping through the quiet. It wasn't her usual playful woof. This was a primal warning, a sound that vibrated in the air. The puppies, startled, huddled together, whimpering softly. Rusty, despite his still healing leg, pushed himself up straighter. He watched Bess, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He didn't understand the danger precisely, but he understood her fear, her protective instinct. The coyotes paused in their circling, their yellow eyes glinting in the dying light. They seemed to assess Bess, her size, her ferocity. For a moment, there was only silence, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, with a coordinated movement, they began to advance. Not a full-out charge, but a slow, deliberate approach, their eyes fixed on the porch, on the vulnerable puppies. Hemlock swore under his breath, setting down his mug with a clatter. He grabbed the old rifle he kept leaning against the porch post, his hand shaking slightly. Bess stood her ground, barking relentlessly, her hackles raised. But Hemlock knew, and she probably knew too, that she couldn't fight them all. And Rusty, injured as he was, would be little help. The coyotes were getting closer, their shadows stretching long and menacing across the yard. The air grew colder, the silence punctuated only by Bess's desperate barks and the soft whimpers of the puppies. The hunt had begun. An unlikely hero. A chorus of yelps, distinct from the soft puppy dreams, ripped Rusty from sleep. These cries were laced with pure terror. Bess, a black streak of agitated fur, barked with a desperation that trumped even her most intimidating pronouncements. He craned his neck, his vision hampered by the blanket barricade. His leg throbbed, a persistent, unwelcome companion. Then he spotted them. Two gaunt, gray phantoms haunted the shadows beyond the porch, their eyes twin chips of night. Puppies. Bess stood her ground, a whirlwind of snapping teeth and guttural defiance, but they circled, probing for weakness. One feigned left, diverting her attention, as its partner inched towards the huddled puppies by the doorway. A surge of pure, animalistic adrenaline flooded Rusty. He shed the memory of his aching leg, the weeks of debilitating weakness. Only the imperative to shield the vulnerable consumed him. He propelled himself upwards, a growl erupting from deep within, a sound foreign even to his own ears. He launched himself from the blankets, the jarring impact a fiery jolt through his leg, which he promptly ignored. He scrabbled towards the predators, a spitting, hissing fury of mottled fur. Smaller, weaker, still convalescing but armed with surprise. Taken aback by the sudden emergence of this enraged creature, the coyotes hesitated. He slashed his claws across the nose of the closer one, eliciting a sharp cry of pain. The report of a rifle cracked the stillness. Old Man Hemlock stood silhouetted on the porch, smoke curling from the barrel. Startled by the shot and stung by Rusty's assault, the remaining coyotes broke and vanished into the encroaching darkness. Rusty collapsed, breath ragged, his leg a searing agony. The fleeting rush of adrenaline receded, leaving him shaky and depleted. A fresh, burning sensation flared in his side, hotter than the throbbing in his leg. Had one of the coyotes managed to land a blow? Bess nudged him gently, her ferocious barks replaced by worried whimpers. She licked his face, then his side, her rough tongue investigating the wound. Emboldened by the subsided threat, the puppies crept closer, their small bodies a source of warmth and solace. Old Man Hemlock approached cautiously, concern etched onto his weathered face. "Well, I'll be damned," he mumbled, examining Rusty's injury. "Looks like you took one for the pack, son." He applied a makeshift bandage with surprising tenderness. Lying there, enveloped by the warmth of the puppies and Bess's watchful presence, Rusty felt an unexpected bond solidify. He gazed out at the vast, unforgiving landscape, the darkness that concealed both beauty and peril. He understood he couldn't abandon them. Not now. Never. He was their guardian now. This was where he belonged. He closed his eyes, inhaling the mingled scents of earth and fur. The pain in his leg persisted, a dull thrum now, eclipsed by a profound sense of purpose. He was home. A new family. Rusty surfaced from unconsciousness into a tactile world of dense fur and panting warmth. Confusion fogged his mind, the persistent throb in his leg a painful bass note to the chorus of tiny wet sounds around him. 4 miniature canines, noses aquiver, were a blurry tableau of devoted attention, their tongues meticulously cleaning his tangled coat. Bess, a tawny guardian, stood watch, her amber gaze unwavering, a low, resonant hum emanating from her chest. A shift brought a jolt of agony from his injured limb. Bess responded with a soft whine, a gentle nudge from her muzzle, followed by a surprisingly tender lick across his face. Delicate for such a powerful creature. Buoyed by their mother's gesture, the pups intensified their efforts, their playful gnaws surprisingly soothing against his skin. The cabin door creaked open and Old Man Hemlock appeared, his face a roadmap of worry that eased upon seeing Rusty awake. A slow, genuine smile illuminated his cragged face. He carried a steaming bowl, releasing a fragrant cloud of broth and herbs that spiced the air. "Well, look who's up," Hemlock rasped, his voice a comforting rumble. "Seems you've acquired admirers." He knelt, offering the bowl. "Drink up, son. Build yourself back up." Rusty hesitated, then tentatively tasted the broth. It was a balm against the chill, savory and fortifying. He drank deeply, feeling the warmth spread through his depleted muscles. The pups, momentarily forgotten, scrambled for a taste, but Bess resolutely held them back, ensuring Rusty had his fill. The days bled into weeks. Sustained by Hemlock's nurturing care and the pup's endless affection, Rusty gradually recovered. The yard transformed into their shared domain. Though still limping, he'd swat playfully at the pups as they tumbled in a chaotic heap. Bess joined their games, her joyous barks echoing through the valley, creating a vibrant soundtrack of companionship. Hemlock often observed from his porch, a silent witness to this unlikely kinship. The tableau of the bobcat, the shepherd, and her offspring at play stirred something within him, a profound sense of peace he hadn't known for years. He had seen too much of the world's callous nature. But here, in this small haven, something beautiful was blossoming. One evening, as the sun dipped low, igniting the heavens with fiery hues, Rusty found himself encircled by his adopted kin. The pups were fast asleep, nestled against his flank, their soft bodies a comforting weight. Bess rested her head on his back, her breath a warm caress against his fur. From the porch, Hemlock watched, his eyes alight with warmth. Rusty closed his eyes, embracing the tranquil sounds of the ranch. The cricket's evening song, the far-off bellow of cattle, the steady reassuring rhythm of Bess's breathing. No longer an isolated predator, simply surviving. He was woven into something larger, something precious. He was home now. He was family. And for the first time in a very long while, Rusty felt utterly and completely secure.